Less than 2 hours to go until Big Lee Anderson's new GB News show starts. Lee is, of course, a big Brexit backer, and I caught up with him a little bit earlier on today. So I started off by asking him about this week's poll that found that 88% of Leave voters who think that Brexit has gone badly wrong say that they have lost faith in our politicians. Over to you.
Well, I think there's a lot of people out there at the moment, Patrick, that do not like politicians. I can understand why. We're going through a very, very difficult time at the moment, not with the cost of living problems we've got, and we see that mortgage rates have gone up once again. But look, you know what? 7 years ago, we voted today to leave the European Union. If we'd have voted to remain, would things have been any different today? Would remaining in the EU prevented COVID, the COVID outbreak, the pandemic? Would remaining in the EU prevented the war in Ukraine? No, it wouldn't. So, you know, I think people are looking sometimes for excuses or reasons or people to blame, especially the opposition politicians, the Labour Party and the like. They can try and put all the blame back at the Brexit door. But the truth of the matter is, would we be that much different at the moment if we'd have been remained in the EU? And I think probably not. And the big thing for me, Patrick, as you know, it's always been about sovereignty. Sovereignty. About the ability to make our own laws in this country, not have laws made behind closed doors in foreign lands. That was the main reason for me. So, yes, we've had a bumpy time over the past 2 or 3 years, but I'm sure it's going to get better. I've got absolute faith in this country, our great country, to make our own way in the world.
That's what people don't seem to understand about Brexiteers, Lee, which is that it was about something bigger than the minutiae on a spreadsheet. And we genuinely, I think, believe that Britain has got the capacity to actually become great again, to become even greater. Do you feel as though that there are many people, like the Alistair Campbells of this world, who would rather see Britain fail to prove that they were right than accept that we can actually be a success on our own?
Well, I mean, Alistair Campbell is a spent force, Patrick. He needs to go and sit in a museum somewhere so school children can walk by and say, you know, that's what politics used to be like. He's no place in politics at the moment. He needs to keep his nose out. And yes, fundamentally, he does want it to fail. He does want to say, I told you so all the time. But like I said, Patrick, you know, this country of ours, I've said it many, many times on GB News, it's a gift to the world. All the great things in this world have started in this country. We've been innovative, you know, we've been industrious, we've been creative throughout the world. All the best sports, the best industry, everything good about this world comes from this country. We can get back to that. We can be Great Britain and we can be a great force in the modern world.
Nigel Farage thinks that the establishment never wanted us to vote for Brexit and that never wanted it to succeed. And Brexiteers, from where I'm sitting, have taken an absolute kicking over the years. They had talk of a second referendum. Theresa May was a complete and utter dud with it. They've been demonised. They've been called horrible names. It's been ridiculous, right? But actually, I do seriously think, though... Go on, Leo, you take it away.
The establishment, yes, whoever the establishment may be. I think you're probably right, Patrick. You have to remember, before I got to Parliament and my colleagues, that probably... I don't know, 75% of the MPs in Parliament of all parties were probably Remainers and wanted us to remain in the European Union, which was, you know, a sign that Parliament was probably out of touch with the majority of the country, and they were. So, you know, it's a bitter pill to swallow for some people, some politicians and the establishment, as you say. But, you know, it's a little bit spiteful, you know, for people to be sniggering on the sidelines when they see things not going so well. They should get behind the whole country. You know, the whole country made a massive decision, the biggest decision in my lifetime, and we should get behind it. And people like Alistair Campbell need to go and clear off somewhere.
Look, we can't get around the fact that immigration hasn't got any better. In fact, it's got even worse. Record net migration, record illegal migration. They'll keep massaging those figures more than someone in a backstreet Soho knocking shop, won't they? And they'll say, oh, well, look, it's the fact that we've had to accept a load of Ukrainians and Afghans. There'll always be an excuse. The reality is that we haven't got to grips with immigration, and that's going to wind people up, isn't it? And my concern, I think, and possibly your concern more...
But it winds me up, Patrick. You know my thoughts on illegal immigration and legal immigration. I think there's been an acknowledgement over the past month or so by government that it is too high, it needs to come down. Of course it needs to come down. You know, it creates a massive strain on our public services. We know that. There's a massive cost there's a social cost as well, Patrick. Don't forget that. about social cohesion, it creates problems. And it's all right for us MPs, sat in our 5-6 bedroom houses in gated communities, not living in the real world, not struggling to get that dental appointment or that doctor's appointment. Lot of MPs in there have got private medical insurance. All right for those sort of people, but real people are really feeling the pinch at the moment, and it's the real people that we need to speak out for.
It is. And on that note, Lee, you're going to be doing some speaking out of your own in a show that starts tonight, I believe. Do you want to fill us in a bit about what we can expect? I mean, if it's more of what you've just spoken about there, I think the GB News viewers are going to love it.
Well, I'll tell you what you can expect, Patrick. There's going to be a sudden influx, an outbreak of common sense across the nation. That's what I'm hoping for. The first show was recorded yesterday. It's pretty good, I think. Got some great guests on there. But what I want to do, Patrick, is get around the country and speak to some real people. Your taxi drivers, your bus drivers, your factory workers, your street cleaners, people that work in cafes and pubs, etc. Because these are the people. When I go about in Ashfield talking to these real people, these are the people with the real common sense in this country. It's about time some of us that work in that bubble, spent more time with our constituents, more time with real people. And if we did that, I'm sure we can make a much better job and be more representative.
Just very lastly then, Lee, and I'll let you get going. For those people who took part in this poll about whether or not they vote for Brexit again, who said that they wouldn't and that they regret it, what would you say to them?
I would say keep the faith, take a deep breath, because if we'd have stayed in the EU, ask yourself the question, if we'd have stayed in the European Union, would things have been any different? Would it have stopped the pandemic? And would it have stopped the war in Ukraine, which is creating all sorts of problems? And the answer is no, it wouldn't.